Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Leopard, a novel, by Giuseppe di Lampedusa, translated by Archibald Cahoon, narrated by Paul Woodson. Foreword. Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa was unable to see his works through to publication. In April 1957 he was diagnosed with a tumor on the lung, and although at the end of May he set out hopefully for Rome, he was to die there on July 23rd. He had been trying to find a publisher for The Leopard for a year. The novel had been submitted to Mondadori and turned down. It had gone on to Einaudi, and a few days before his death the author had received another rejection letter. However, Lampedusa was convinced that the book had merit. Before leaving for Rome, he had drawn up 2 testamentary letters, one addressed to his wife, Alessandra Lisi Wolf Stommersee, and the other addressed to me, his adopted son. On May 30th he had also written to Enrico Merlo regarding the work. The letter to Merlo and the testamentary letter to me were discovered in 2000 by Giuseppe Bianchieri, the princess's nephew, in a volume of The Voyages of Captain Cook. The princess had picked up her husband's habit of using books as hiding places for private papers. Sometimes both spouses would lose documents this way, and also sometimes hidden banknotes. To forget which book had been used was the equivalent of forgetting one's password nowadays. The letter to Enrico Merlo accompanied a typescript of the novel, with a brief description of how the characters corresponded to real people. The identifications are unambiguous, except for Tancredi, whom Lampedusa claimed to have based on me physically, and on the careers of the 2 senators, Francesco and Pietro Lanza di Scalea. Francesco, exiled in Tuscany and then appointed to the Senate by the king on unification, had been a supporter of the center-left, and had run unsuccessfully for the post of mayor of Palermo. His son Pietro had been Minister of War in the Facta government, and Minister for the Colonies in the first Mussolini government. Pietro was a professional politician. Under-secretary at the time of the war with Libya, he moved from the center-left to the right. Thus he matched the description of Tancredi that Lampedusa wrote in the unfinished chapter of The Leopard, the Salina Canzoniere. Tancredi was still too young to aspire to any particular government office, but his energy and his fresh supply of funds made him indispensable wherever he went. He campaigned in that highly profitable gray area of the extreme left of the extreme right, a magnificent springboard that was later to allow him to perform some admirable and much admired acrobatics. However, he wisely masked his intense political activity with a nonchalance, a levity of expression, that left everyone disarmed. In the days of longhand writing, the extent of a correspondence was determined by the size of a sheet folded in 4. The writing proceeded until space ran out, and often the correspondent was constrained to write the final sentence and the signature across the lines. For an author explaining the meaning of his novel to a cultured and expert Sicilian, the letter to Merlo is a laconic communication, an example of understatement raised to a model of ethical and aesthetic behavior at one and the same time. N.H. Baron Enrico Merlo di Tagliavia, S.M. 30th of May, 1957. Dear Enrico, in the letter folder you will find the typescript of The Leopard. Do please treat it with care, for it is the only copy I possess. Do please also give it an attentive reading, because each word has been weighed up, and many things are not made explicit but only hinted at. It seems to me to offer a measure of interest, because it evokes a Sicilian nobleman at a moment of crisis, not to be taken to mean simply that of 1860. How he reacts to it, and how the degeneration of the family becomes ever more marked, until it reaches almost total collapse. All this, however, seen from within, with a certain connivance of the author, and with no rancor as is to be found, for instance, in the viceroys. No need to tell you that the Prince of Salina is the Prince Lampedusa, my great-grandfather Giulio Fabrizio. Everything about him is real, his build, his mathematics, the pretense at violence, the skepticism, the wife, the German mother, the refusal to be a senator. Father Pirone is also authentic, even his name. I think I have given them both a greater degree of intelligence than was in fact the case. Tancredi is, physically and in his behavior, Gio, morally a blend of Senator Scalea and his son Pietro. I've no idea who Angelica is, but bear in mind that the name Sedara is quite similar to Favara. Donna Fugata as a village is Palma, as a palace, Santa Margherita. I'm particularly fond of the last two chapters. The death of Don Fabrizio, who had always been alone even though he had a wife and 7 children. The question of the relics, which sets its seal on everything, is absolutely authentic and witnessed by me in person. Sicily is Sicily, 1860, earlier, forever. I believe the whole thing is not without its elegiac poetry. I'm leaving today, don't know when I'll be back. If you want to get in touch, write to me, care of Signora Biancheri, via S. Martino della Battaglia 2, Rome. With fondest greetings, your Giuseppe. On the back of the envelope, N.B. The dog Bendico is a vitally important character and practically the key to the novel. This testamentary letter demonstrates the author's gift. It is written in a style appropriate to this sort of letter, but at the same time it reveals a way with words that conveys a powerful feeling of affection, along with a close control of vocabulary and phraseology. Lampedusa's readings of Stendhal had made him a disciple. For Gio, May 1957. My dearest Gioito, I am anxious that, even with the curtain down, my voice should reach you to convey to you how grateful I am for the comfort your presence has brought me these last 2 or 3 years of my life, which have been so painful and somber, but which would have been quite simply tragic were it not for you and darling Mirella. Our lives, Lisi's and mine, were on the point of running into the sands, what with worries and age, but your affection, your constant presence, the gracious way in which you lived, shed a little light in our darkness. I have been enormously fond of you, Gioito. I have never had a son, but I do think I could never have loved one more than I have loved you. This sort of letter normally ends by asking pardon for offenses committed. I have to say that however much I search my memory, I really have no recollection of having ever wronged you. If you can remember anything, do believe it was never intended. I beg your pardon at all events. I should also like to ask you to try to find a publisher for the Leopard. I ask you to convey to Giovanna, Casimiro, and Lucio how very grateful I am to them for the constant warmth I have always found in them. La Piana has been one of the few oases of light in these, my latest years, which have been plunged in darkness. And tell them I beg they transfer to you and Mirella all the affection they might have felt for me. Do please read this letter to Lisi. I close with a big hug for you and Mirella and so much love, and wishing you all possible happiness. During these same final days of May, Lampedusa also drew up his will, which he enclosed with a letter entitled, Last Will, Private. The will is to be found in a separate envelope. It expresses the anger of a man certain to die. It is my desire, indeed my firm wish, that my death should go unannounced either in the press or by any other means. The funeral should be kept as simple as possible and at some inconvenient hour. I want no flowers and nobody to accompany me apart from my wife, my adopted son, and his fiancée. I would have either my wife or my son write to Ingegnere Guido Laiolo, Rua Everlandia, 1147 Sao Paulo, Brazil, informing him of my death. I want all possible steps to be taken to publish the Leopard. The manuscript in question is the handwritten one contained in a single fat notebook. Needless to say, this does not mean having it published at my heir's expense. I should consider this a gross humiliation. Should the work be published, one copy with dedication should be sent to each of the following: Signora Ilyashenko,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?